The yellow jersey of overall leader Richie Porte is isolated on what has been a wild start to the last day of the Criterium du Dauphine. Porte is now in a small group chasing two of his biggest competitors, Alejandro Valverde and Fabio Aru, who are half a minute up the road. The fuse has already been lit for what should be an explosive final day at the Dauphine. Hi everyone, Steve Schlanger with Christian Vande Velde. It is the 8th stage of this race that began 1 week ago today. And this 69th edition reaches the Queen stage, which is the hardest day of the entire week, with Richie Porte as the leader by over a minute, on top of Chris Froome and Jakob Fuglsang. Fabio Aru and Alejandro Valverde round out the top 5. But as I mentioned, Christian, it is the hardest day, also the shortest, but it's already been hectic on the road.
It's been absolutely crazy. Only 71 miles of racing today, but over 13,000 feet of climbing, with 2 Category 1 climbs and Category 2 in the middle, and of course that HC above category climb of the Plateau de Solazan. The riders are halfway up the Col de Columbia, the penultimate climb right there. They have a long descent all the way down back to the valley floor, and then that brutal climb all the way up at 11.3 kilometers long, 9.2% average.
They've already gone up a Cat 1, a Cat 2. This is the Cat 1 Colombier, and that is the Frenchman Tony Galopin attacking from the yellow jersey group. He's been very active all day long, as have some of the other marquee names in this race. We've seen a lot of attacks from some of the big names trying to make a move on this final day. And now this is another look at Galopin as he accelerates away from the yellow jersey group.
Tony Galopin's been on the march since Albertville, which must seem like hours, days ago for all these guys. They've already climbed straight from Albertville to the top of Col de Sazes. That was already 4,000 feet of climbing the first 18 miles. And at that time, there's only one teammate of Richie Porte, maybe 2 at times. And then Chris Froome kept on attacking, making sure that Richie Porte had nobody to help him out on the road here.
All right, let's set the scene and give you the lay of the land. In the green jersey for Cannondale, that was Simon Clark. Behind him for Sky in the dark, Mikhail Kwiatkowski. They're in the brown and white for AG2R. That is Alexis Viermoz, who is the teammate of Romain Bardet, their general classification leader, who made some big moves in the mountains yesterday. Now, back in the yellow jersey group at the tail end, that's Alberto Contador. At the very front, the yellow jersey of Richie Porte, and Chris Froome was just behind him. And then we have that second group on the road here that includes Jakob Fuglsang in the aqua color jersey of Astana. Bardet is also in that group. Dan Martin in blue. So a lot of the top favorites, a lot of the top 10 of the general classification spread out in different groups here with just south of 40K left to go. And just over 40 seconds is the spread. This Colombier climb will summit with just inside of 35K left to go to the finish, as Porte leads the way ahead of Froome, Emmanuel Buchmann, the best young rider in the white jersey, and then Luis Menkes, who's sitting 4th in this contingent.
This is very dangerous right now for Richie Porte, being on the front here, not because of the climb and having to do some work on the front, but a little bit later have that big valley that he has to contend. He can't afford to be on the front all the way through that valley. As you see him pulling off and other riders attacking over the top of him.
Yeah, 3 different riders going up the road, including Buchmann, Menkes. This is back to the very front. Kwiatkowski for Sky with the unzipped jersey. Simon Clark in green. And then Fuglsang here. Dan Martin's on the back of the group.
So we have 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th off the front right now. That is very dangerous right now, especially that last group that we just saw with Jakob Fuglsang going up the road with Bardet and Dan Martin.
And when you consider the general classification and the top 3 right now, Fuglsang is ahead of the 2 men in front of him on the GC. Porte and Froome are in 1st and 2nd respectively. Fuglsang is in 3rd, but Fuglsang ahead of them both right now. Not much of a gap between Froome and Fuglsang in the overall as well. There's more of a gap between Porte and Froome in 1st and 2nd. Boy, on a day like this, not much tactics, not much controlled racing by 1 or 2 teams that we typically see in a lot of races throughout the year, Christian. This is more just pure individual racing, taking advantage of the course and the fact that it's a short day overall.
There's a little bit of tactics just with teammates sending them up the road, like you see Mikhail Kwiatkowski right there, speaking back most likely to the team car and Chris Froome, asking what he wants them to do. It looks like he's just thinking about either do you need my help back there or should I stay with this group? So there's a little bit of tactics, but you're right. For the most part, when it's only 70 miles long and you have over 13,000 feet of climbing, it comes down to legs and legs alone. But in the case of Richie Porte, he really needs to be cold-blooded today. He can't get too worried about what's going on. He has to really relax as much as is humanly possible, even though he's being assaulted by every team in the whole peloton right now.
Well, Porte has been spot on, not just this week, but really all season long to this point. And now Dan Martin ahead of Bardet.
Only about 3 kilometers to the top. It is a pretty quick climb. It's not so steep. Colombier is 11.5 kilometers long. It's 6% average. So there's a few places that are a little bit steeper than others, obviously. Some places only about 4% where you could really start rolling quickly, which you saw there earlier. And towards the top, a little bit steeper. Quick downhill. But this next climb is just ugly. The Plateau de Solazan.
Yeah, the above category climb over 11K at over 9%. And this is Alejandro Valverde and Fabio Aru.
These guys are 4th and 5th overall in the general classification. These are the 2 leaders on the road. Then you have Dan Martin's group right behind them. These guys are 141 and 143 behind Richie Porte in the general classification.
And the top 5 separated by just 1:43 seconds. And now here's that Dan Martin group that's being led by Jakob Fuglsang, who, as you might remember, won a few days ago his first ever World Tour victory when he won stage 6, out-sprinting both Porte and Froome at the line. And now back to Porte, who again is without teammates. But he does have a lead of over a minute on the general classification. 1:02 back to Chris Froome, who sits in 2nd, and Fuglsang, who's in 3rd, is 1:15 down. But that lack of teammates with still the remainder of the Colombier climb, the HC climb, the Solazan, the above classification ascent, will the lack of teammates come back to hurt him? That'll be the question. So you have Aru and Valverde at the front of the race. The Martin group just over half a minute back, and the Richie Porte yellow jersey contingent that's almost a minute and a half down. And these are our 2 leaders, Valverde and Aru. 2 guys who could be fighting for a podium spot today on the final day of the Criterium du Dauphiné, and all of the marquee names are fighting it out on the second to last climb. Final day of the Dauphiné and the penultimate climb of the race, the Colombier, that will summit with 34.5K left to go. This is our second group on the road. Romain Bardet, Dan Martin, and Jakob Fuglsang. Dan Martin now at the front. But up ahead, the story that is unfolding, our 2 leaders on the road are Alejandro Valverde and Fabio Aru. Alberto Contador, meantime, is back with the small yellow jersey group that contains Richie Porte and Chris Froome. But Aru up the road with Valverde, getting a pretty sizable gap on this group, almost a minute and a half, and Aru is closing in on becoming the virtual leader of the race overall, starting the day 141 back of Richie Porte, and last gap we got was 125 ahead on the road. And now Chris Froome riding to the back of this group.
Wherever Richie goes, Chris Froome goes. Just sitting right behind him, marking his every move. Again, just trying to get inside his head. And I think he's easily gotten inside his head from the go. I mean, from kilometer 0, Chris Froome has been on the move, attacking countless times on all these climbs, even attacking on the downhill earlier.
A small group starting to form here. Best young rider up there in the white jersey, Emmanuel Buchmann. Luis Menkes at the back of this group, and that's Alberto Contador, 3rd wheel, number 41. And now back to Aru, 71, and Alejandro Valverde just ahead of him. The 2 leaders on the stage.
Not far to the summit here, so we'll get a perfect time as they crest this last climb here, the Col de Colombier. As I said before, the longest downhill of the day is going to be right after the top of this, and they have a little bit of valley, and that's going to be the worst part for Richie Porte. Who's going to do that work for that 10 kilometers of flat before they hit that last climb?
Now, Chris Froome has been below his usual standard this week. And if he doesn't pull off something here, he's going to go into the Tour de France without a victory for the first time since 2012. Sitting in second on the general classification, but Richie Porte actually at this time has to worry about guys behind Froome on the GC. The likes of Fuglsang, Aru, and Valverde, as well as Romain Bardet, who are up the road gaining time. Still a long way to go to the finish, more climbing, but a lot that Richie Porte has to keep in mind.
This is remind me a lot of 2014 when Ryder Hesjedal was up ahead and Andrzej Talansky attacked out of the peloton. All the big leaders were in the back shadow boxing. Just a lot like today where you see Richie Porte and Chris Froome really looking at each other. And you have Aru and Valverde on the march going ahead of the race right now.
Now the Dauphine has made this somewhat of a habit, looking to spruce up the final day of the race, so adding some serious climbing, a shorter stage. It makes for some explosive action. And that's what they've got in the last few years, as Chris Froome made a gesture a moment ago for the cars to go through. Seems to be a little frustrated.
Well, they need to get some service up there because they probably haven't had water bottles in quite some time being on the attack. So there needs to be a minute gap in between groups for them usually to allow the cars that go up the road. So obviously there's more than a minute in between these riders right now. So before the top of this climb, make sure that they get up to their leaders and get some water before they start going down this descent.
So Simon Clark dropping Mikhail Kwiatkowski. Kwiatkowski in the black kit there for Sky on the left-hand side of the screen. Contador leading the group just behind. He's in the red and black for Trek. And the best young rider in the white jersey, Emmanuel Buchmann. We think he's in that group as well.
I don't think that Kwiatkowski's getting dropped here. I think he's waiting to be of service of that man right there, Chris Froome on the right-hand side from Team Sky. I think Kwiatkowski could easily have stayed with those guys up there in the front, but I think that's more of team orders to be around Chris Froome as much as possible. There we go. Now we have a time gap of 1:35, so they're taking another 10 seconds in the last couple of kilometers.
So Fabio Aru, who is 2 seconds ahead of Alejandro Valverde on the general classification, but 1:41 down on Richie Porte, that man in yellow as the day started. Now just 8 seconds away from riding into the yellow jersey on the road. And look at Porte trying to stretch things out here. He's got Chris Froome right behind him, but look at how small these groups are. Just a smattering of riders here and there. Ones and twos, 4, 5 somewhere else.
There you have Kwiatkowski there dropping back yet again, letting those other group go past, get back to Chris Froome, see if he needs anything. And we can't forget about nutrition as well. Richie Porte has not had any teammates around him to give him any water bottles, food, anything he needs. So he needs to really rely on the team car being there with him. A lot of times they get spread out all over God's creation in a stage race like today.
So this is the second group on the road. They are behind the Valverde Aru twosome, who are up here. That group we just saw contained Bardet, Dan Martin, and Jakob Fuglsang. And Fuglsang's teammate Aru is here taking on bottles. And again, the official summit, 34.5K for this Colombier climb. And then the final climb beyond classification, Solazan, will take us the final 11.3K to the finish.
Richie's doing a smart ride here. Slowly coming back to this group. He wants to make sure that he makes contact with these guys before the downhill, especially before that valley road of 10 kilometers, which I was alluding to earlier. 1 kilometer to the top of this last climb. The biggest problem right now is if that Dan Martin and Jakob Fuglsang group makes contact with those two riders in the front, then these guys are going to be in big trouble trying to bring those guys back.
And a Sam Oman of the Sunweb team, who's right behind Chris Froome, who's riding alongside Richie Porte. Got some wind out on the road on this climb as well.
Looks like a tailwind right now. That's very good for Richie Porte because you don't get as much of a draft, especially in a tailwind. You're going quite slow, 25 maybe kilometers per hour, so 12 to 15 miles per hour, most likely more around 10 going up a climb like this. There's Mikhail Kwiatkowski we were talking about. He's been in the breakaway pretty much all day. Looks like he's sitting up waiting for his team leader, Chris Froome.
So he'll be able to link up with Froome momentarily. Porte isolated, however. Knowing what we know about Richie Porte, he has had a terrific season. Mentally, is this the type of situation we're seeing today that you think he can handle the rest of the way?
He's done well so far. He's trying to minimize all the accelerations, attacks. There's only so much one person can do over the course of one day. You can only have so much glycogen in your legs. You know, but Chris Froome has nothing to lose, so he's going to keep on attacking, just like Alberto Contador has it in years past, and just like these guys right here, very aggressive. Most of these guys, I mean, Chris Froome's won this race 3 times already. Top 5 doesn't mean anything to him. So it's all or nothing. Go for it or go home.
So Valverde and Aru within half a K from the summit, and this is the margin from the front of the race back to the Froome Porte group. Everybody within 122, but that's dangerously close to making Fabio Aru the leader of the race on the road, because he's in the front twosome. And you got the Martin group that's second on the road.
Yeah, Aru is now 20 seconds away from being the leader on the road. It looks like Richie Porte is taking some time back on these guys, going to the front, doing all the work all on his lonesome, trying to get back into that Alberto Contador group before this descent.
This is a very tough situation for Porte because he doesn't have teammates, and it's the type of day where you can't follow all the moves. You can't cover everybody, so you have to be selective and pick your spots.
Well, it looks like Kwiatkowski was exhausted. He's out the back there yet again, so he's gone from the front all the way to the back in the last few kilometers. As we see here, Alejandro Valverde and Aru cresting the penultimate climb of the Col de Colombier. Looks like they have a nice tailwind to boot, so they're going to be flying down into this valley.
Oh, and now Chris Froome makes a move ahead of Richie Porte as they work their way towards the summit of the climb. Porte trying to respond, not on Froome's wheel, riding steady at the moment, but Froome is opening up somewhat of a gap. Again, Froome 1:02 behind Porte at the start of the stage.
Oh, that hurts so bad. I mean, of course, I would have done the same thing. That's great tactics. You know, Richie Porte's been on the front for a long time. Chris Froome sees an opportunity to try to leap across into the Alberto Contador group before they start descending. And like we were alluding to before, Richie Porte can't go with every single attack. He needs to be smart and relax and just try to bring him back slowly but surely. And probably he's going to have to take a lot of risks on this descent.
Well, right now, Froome opening the gap. It's getting bigger, not smaller, to Richie Porte. And other dangerous riders in the general classification ahead of even Froome. Fuglsang, Aru, Valverde, Bardet, Contador, Martin. In fact, the 7 riders behind the yellow jersey on the general classification are all ahead of him on the road right now as he goes over the summit of the second to last climb. So a dangerous situation for our leader, Richie Porte, isolated, without teammates, chasing everybody who's chasing him in the overall standings. We come back to Richie Porte at the front of this foursome in the yellow jersey, but he is chasing 7 other riders who are just behind him on the general classification, but who have gone up the road and are taking time on the overall leader. And right behind Porte, places 2nd through 5th. Those 4 positions separated by just 41 seconds on the general classification. So a lot can still happen here. Podium spots are up for grabs. Even the yellow jersey is in play here on this final day of the Dauphine. And that man, Chris Froome, attacking Richie Porte near the upper slopes of that last climb. Always good on the descent. 1:02 behind Porte as the day started. And gaining on Porte now. Remember that descent off the Monza shot the other day.
Wow. Chris Froome is taking some risks right now, Steve, going down this climb. Very impressive. Always impressed by how he attacks every descent, especially what he did last year in the Tour de France, pedaling on his top tube, sitting there. That's the most aerodynamic position you could possibly get into. Yep. Obviously very dangerous. Don't do that at home. He's already made contact now with this group, the Contador group.
That's the Contador, Bookman, Yates group here. So 6 riders now together.
He's going to go right to the front here, Steve. He's going to continue to push his pace. He does not want to let up and let Richie Porte get back into the fold. He needs to keep on pressing.
Remember, he led the group on the descent to the Mont du Chat the other day. He was the best descender in that foursome. Took time on Nairo Quintana on a descent at the Tour de France last year. Over the last few years, he has become one of the best descenders among the Grand Tour favorites.
Chris Froome's having a little bit of a word as he passes everyone. I saw him say something to Simon Yates. Probably that Richie's behind, time to press on. Obviously, Chris Froome has a lot more to gain than Simon.
Contador second wheel in this group, Froome right behind him. Now remember, you still have Aru and Valverde up the road, the first two in the lead. Contador looking for a moment to take a bite of some food here. Just holding the wrapper in his mouth. When are you going to do it? You're on a descent, you got these tight turns. He may just have to bide his time.
He's already done it. It's not his first rodeo. Alberto knows exactly how to keep some food in his body. He knows there's a long race you have to go. Really, it's only 18 miles to go, but let's not forget they have pretty much 3,500 feet of climbing still you have to do, not to mention all the accelerations you have to do out of all these corners on a descent like this.
Now Froome at the front.
Froome's taking no prisoners on this descent.
Now look at this. Richie Porte, 133 behind the front of the race, and that's Fabio Aru and Alejandro Valverde. So again, that places Aru just 8 seconds off the virtual race lead.
And most likely, Richie Porte's not going to get any help from that group whatsoever.
Second group, Bardet, Martin, and Fuglsang, also containing some dangerous riders. Fuglsang, third on the general classification, 115 down on Porte. So even though we've been keeping an eye on Froome and his attack of Porte here recently, the fact that Fuglsang is up the road, also gaining on Richie Porte, let's not count him out.
Well, I'm not counting him, that's for sure. It'd be interesting to see if Aru actually waits in the valley for Jakob right here in this group right here. These guys are 50 seconds. That's starting to be, that gap is starting to open up. Looks like Valverde and Aru are definitely flying down this descent.
Adds another tasty dynamic to the narrative here, because Fuglsang and Aru, who we're seeing right here, are going to be co-leaders for Astana at the Tour de France. It was supposed to be Fuglsang because Aru was injured, but now, as we've seen this week, he seems to be back close to 100%. How will they work together, if at all, here, as they race for the yellow jersey at the Dauphine? One more big climb still to go. Chris Froome leading this group that contains Alberto Contador in pursuit of the race leaders. He still has the second group on the road up ahead. That's Bardet, Fuglsang, and Dean Martin. And then the two leaders outright on the road, Fabio Aru and Alejandro Valverde. Big story developing. Richie Porte has been dropped by all of the favorites. He's 135 now behind our two leaders. And everybody that matters to Porte is ahead of him on the road. That's a problem.
These two gentlemen, here's the leaders right now. 134 ahead of Richie. Richie's actually lost 15 seconds on the descent. He brought it back to 120 at the top. Looks like Alejandro Valverde extending that yet again. And more importantly, extending the lead in between himself and Dan Martin and Jakob Fuglsang right behind them.
Alejandro Valverde, fifth in the general classification, just 2 seconds behind Aru, who's in fourth. Fabio Aru, every day that this race has been in the mountains, he's been very dynamic. Coming back from the knee injury that kept him out of the Giro d'Italia. Chris Froome attacking Porte near the summit of the last climb, and he left him in the rearview mirror.
I don't think they should be so far. There they are, right there. Those are the three riders right ahead. Dan Martin, Jakob Fuglsang, and Bardet right ahead. And there's this Chris Froome's group.
They're going to get him.
They're definitely going to get him. They're going to get him before the bottom of this descent. And then we have that valley road for about 10 kilometers, and that's where most likely Richie Porte is going to hemorrhage time to these guys.
Well, it is really getting bad for Richie Porte at this point.
Richie getting no assistance from anyone right now. Looks like he's actually even getting dropped from some of the riders in his group.
What a tough moment this has to be for Porte. The way he's ridden all week and the way he's really ridden all season. Without teammates, seeing this race potentially slip away. Mentally, how do you keep yourself in the game at this point?
Yeah, it's not easy. You haven't been surrounded by any of your teammates, more or less from the gun. Don't forget they went straight up the Col de Saisies. 4,000 feet of climbing in the first 18 miles of this race, and it has not let up since then.
Here's Bardet, Fuglsang, and Martin. Bardet looks over his shoulder. He'll see the Froome group just behind.
This will be very good for Jakob Fuglsang, actually. He has a big group coming behind, very motivated. He's obviously not going to help work at all, as he has his teammate, Fabio Aru, up the road.
Dan Martin and Bardet exchanging words. What might that be about?
Just about who's coming from behind right now. A lot of times you have different ideas of what's going on from the team directors. Sometimes your radio won't work so well, so a lot of times I might know something that you don't, and vice versa. So just communicating, knowing exactly who's in that group, what to expect, what's the gap to the riders ahead.
And these are our two leaders at the very front still, Valverde and Aru.
We were talking over break who would be the better out of these two riders going up this last climb if they were to stay away, and I have to tip my hat towards Fabio Aru. It looks like he was climbing a little bit better when we were going up the Mont du Chat the other day. That's the only climb that comes anywhere near what we're going to see here in this last climb to the finish line today. Mont du Chat was very steep, very hard. And Plateau de Salazon is equally as hard, especially after you've been grinding so hard in a stage like today.
So in this group here, we have general classification positions 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The ones you don't hear, 4 and 5, those are the two riders at the front of the stage. Also position number 1, he's back down the road chasing everybody, and that is Richie Porte.
Looks like Chris Froome's going to the back, assessing the group a little bit, taking a bit of a breather.
Fuglsang talking in his radio. Of course, his teammate Aru is up the road. Now a little reset as these groups fully come together and they figure out the situation on the road and what the next move is.
This is a good opportunity right now for Richie Porte to keep his foot on the gas and try to come back as these guys sit up a little bit, get some food and water from their team cars. Richie Porte has to be all in right now, trying to get back before that last 10 kilometers of flat before the last climb.
Well, Richie Porte has mitigated some of the damage that Aru was making. I think the big concern now is Froome and Fuglsang. 102 and 115 behind Richie Porte. But in that second group on the road and gaining time on the yellow jersey, who is desperate to save it on the final day of the Dauphine. Now, what we've seen all week at the Dauphine, and also with what we've seen today, perhaps creating some question marks about what might happen in July at the Tour de France. And if you're a cycling fan, it's just the way you like it. And now this is the Orica Scott rider, Simon Yates, I believe.
21.5 kilometers to go means they have about 10 kilometers, a little bit left of this descent, and then more or less falls flat downhill to the bottom of the last climb. Yes, indeed, it is Simon Yates.
So he was in the Contador Froome group.
Richie might have an opportunity to come back here into that group, and that'd be huge for him. So I see his chances slipping away if he's not with this group at the bottom of the last climb.
Valverde and Aru here. What about the chances of these two making it all the way to the finish at this point and fighting it out for a stage win? Still too far away?
Yeah, it's a long way to go, especially when you think that the last climb is about 3,500 feet of elevation change. So that's going to take them about 35 to 40 minutes, depending on how their legs are. So a lot of racing still yet to go. You have to change your mindset when you only see 20K to go. A lot of times on a flat stage, that's only about 28 minutes of racing, 25. But here it's going to be a lot longer than that today. Closer to 50 right now.
Just north of 20K left to go. The final 11.3 all uphill. Simon Yates just outside the top 15 on the general classification, over 5 minutes down. Has not climbed that well this week. Did a solid time trial.
There's Chris Froome going on the offensive yet again on the descent. Going back to the front. Looks like he relaxed a little bit, got some more fluids back in his body, some food. He was full gas for about 12 to 15 kilometers. Let's not forget attacking the last kilometer of the Colombier. and then attacking the entire descent, closing down a 25-second gap to the Alberto Contador group, and now going on the offensive in that group yet again.
Now, Chris Froome may or may not win this race, but this has to be a good sign for him, considering some of what we saw out of Froome that he would have not been happy with in his time trialing and climbing earlier this week, to at least give him a sense that he's on the right track for the Tour.
Oh, for sure, after you see this kind of display. And in all honesty, I don't think we've ever really seen Chris Froome go on the attack this many times ever in a stage. He's very, very calculated, and all the risks he ever takes, you never see him just flat out just attack from kilometer zero all day long.
He's never not won before going to the Tour de France. However, given his experience, his maturity as a rider, and the fact that he's won the Tour 3 times before, you have to believe that if he just comes out of this feeling good about himself and his form, that might be enough for July.
For sure, and let's not forget just the team seeing this, for the team morale to have that confidence in him going into the Tour.
Sure, because they will have the strongest team there, as they usually do.
Easily.
And that'll be another problem for Richie Porte. How strong will BMC be to help him?
And that's glaring today, isn't it?
So a lot of things starting to come into focus, but still, the one thing that's rather fuzzy, who's going to wear the yellow jersey at the end of this race? That's because the man who wears it now, Richie Porte, is struggling to stay afloat here as we go inside to the final 20K with 1 climb still ahead. Some gaps opening up, single file through the town here. Alberto Contador in the middle of the screen in the red and black, just ahead in the blue, that is Dan Martin. Simon Yates just ahead of him with the yellow helmet. Chris Froome riding through at the bottom of the screen there in the dark with the blue stripe. And this is Fabio Aru at the front of the stage. He is with Alejandro Valverde, who has had maybe the best season of anybody so far, winning almost every race he has entered. It'll be an interesting dynamic for Movistar at the Tour next month. Will he help Nairo Quintana? Will Valverde feel he has good enough form that maybe he should have his own shot at the overall? Got several teams in that predicament. Astana as well, with Fuglsang and Aru going as co-leaders.
This is interesting. Kwiatkowski made it back up into this Chris Froome group. That's big to have Kwiatkowski up there driving the pace. That's not good for Richie Porte, who's still trying to make his way back up into this group. Only about 6 kilometers to go, Steve, until the bottom of this climb.
And here's the threesome that contains Porte, Benoot, and Omen.
Hard to watch.
Well, the gap to the front 2 hasn't changed all that much. It's been hovering within a spectrum of about 10 seconds, give or take. But right now, it's the Froome and Fuglsang group that might be the bigger concern to Richie Porte, because they have less time to make up to take that yellow jersey than Fabio Aru or Alejandro Valverde right here.
Even with great legs, I really have seen it's going to be a big ask for Richie Porte to keep these guys enough in check to keep this yellow jersey at the end of this stage. I mean, think about it. He's been on the front now for the last 20 kilometers all by himself. Even longer. Let's think about how long he was on the front in the Colombier. There's only so much power you could have in those legs, especially when you hit a very steep climb like we're about to hit.
Oh, Chris Froome now right behind his teammate Mikel Kwiatkowski. And now back to our front 2. Fabio Aru, who expected him to be this good coming back off that knee injury in a long layoff?
No, I didn't expect that. We saw a glimpse of greatness last year at the Dauphine when he had that stage win, and that was about it. And there's the perspective right there. There's the Chris Froome group, and then there in the back, that's Richie Porte all by his lonesome trying to get back up. So Richie at least has him in sight right now with 5 kilometers to go to the bottom of the last climb.
There are so many other riders ahead of him in that group with Froome that have ambitions, reasons to ride. Porte has to lead that trio by himself, less horsepower, and it's all up to him.
But yeah, back to Aru. I never would have thought he'd be up here in the front like this. Very impressed with Chavez as well, only having 1 race day this year and then coming out here and really riding quite well, considering not having that race fitness, which counts for a lot, especially coming into June and July.
And for Astana, think about the bad luck they have had over the last few months. The unfortunate death of Michele Scarpone, Aru, missing out on the Giro d'Italia, his home Grand Tour. And now here they are bouncing back in June. Aru recovering from his injury. Fuglsang winning his first ever World Tour race. Both are in the hunt for the yellow jersey today, and both will share the leadership role at the Tour next month. So for Astana, things certainly looking up, headed to July, with the Tour de France just 3 weeks away. A lot of heavy hitters in this group. Michael Kwiatkowski leading his teammate Chris Froome. Behind him, Romain Bardet, then Dan Martin, Alberto Contador, Jakob Fuglsang, Emmanuel Buchmann, the best young rider, and Simon Yates, along with Louis Meintjes. And this second group on the road that just came together recently is trying to catch the leading twosome of Fabio Aru and Alejandro Valverde. There they are on the left-hand side of the screen. Aru and Valverde, 4th and 5th on the GC respectively. And Richie Porte now in the third group on the road that is 127 behind Valverde and Aru.
Huge ride by Michael Kwiatkowski. If you think back of what was happening on the Col de Colombier, Kwiatkowski was actually dropped by Richie Porte and Chris Froome. So that means that he went through Richie on the descent and made it back into this group just to do the big turn. And this is what I was fearing for Richie Porte this entire day, that he was going to be all alone on this flat section of 5 to 7 kilometers. He's going to lose a lot of time and a lot of energy, where these guys more or less are just sitting on the wheels, recovering, eating and drinking as much as they possibly can, because they still have a 35-minute climb full gas to the finish line.
So 15K to go for our two leaders. The final climb, 11.3 at over 9%. The first part will be the steepest, where it gets up over 11% in the first 4K. Given what we see on the road right now, if it doesn't change too much between now and the start of the climb, what, Christian, do you expect to see on that final ascent?
Usually, and we're in this kind of situation with Team Sky, they have 3 or 4 riders still in the race at this point in time. They usually ratchet it up, and then when you see the last rider go as hard as he possibly can, that's when Chris Froome usually launches an attack. It's really about how much energy he still has left in those legs. Let's not forget he's attacked throughout the entire stage, but it's not looking like he's slowing down anytime soon right now. So I think he's going to go on the attack. Like I said before, he has nothing to lose. He doesn't care to get 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th in this race. It's all win or nothing. So I think he's definitely going to go on the attack. He needs to still bring back Aru and Valverde, who are up on the road. Oh, now they're very close, actually, Steve.
Do you think they will attack early where it's steepest in those first 4K, or wait till later?
I think so. That's where you could do the most damage. And that's average for 1 kilometer, 11.2. So you know there's pitches of 14, 15%.
A group of 11 here. I consider that places 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the general classification, the 4 spots right behind our leader Richie Porte, are separated by just 41 seconds on the general classification. You also have time bonuses at the finish of 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3. This thing is totally up for grabs at this point, with Richie Porte suffering.
These guys look like they're about to make contact just because of all the work there on the front by Michael Kwiatkowski, the teammate of Chris Froome. Doing a serious ride, very selfless, going up to the front. It looks like Richie Porte is bringing back some time on the leaders, but looks like he's losing a lot of time to that Chris Froome group.
Yeah, that might be his biggest concern, because you have Froome at 102 behind him as the day started. Fuglsang 115 down.
Oh, for sure, that's his biggest concern. And like I've been saying, beating this drum the entire time, what Michael Kwiatkowski is doing, he might be winning this Dauphine for Chris Froome right here.
Kwiatkowski looked like, when he was dropped by Clark and Froome passed him, he was going to be done for the day, but somehow rallied on the descent to that last climb and is now helping to pace Froome, who attacked Porte near the summit.
Well, you talk about tactics early, and if it really comes into play, yes, obviously it does come into play. You know, Kwiatkowski was in the breakaway from the gun, sat up from that breakaway, recovered a little bit, came back on the descent, past Richie Porte right there in the middle of the screen, and then made it back up into his leaders group. Now you see that they're right behind. That's the Chris Froome group right behind Valverde and Aru.
And the gap sizable enough between Froome and Fuglsang and Aru and Valverde that if they catch them, it's pretty much going to be the end of Aru and Valverde's chances of taking that yellow jersey. Now for Richie Porte, though, the tactic's pretty simple and straightforward. He's just got to ride. Got to try to do whatever possible to save that yellow jersey with one long, difficult climb just moments away. So the Froome group that is 11 riders strong, just 13 seconds behind our leading two riders, Aru and Valverde. Porte over a minute back with the final climb of the Dauphine next. So it is the Beyond Classification Solazan climb, the last climb of the Dauphine that starts with 11.3K to go. Richie Porte over a minute back. And this is Michael Kwiatkowski, number 5, leading his teammate Chris Froome just behind. Alberto Contador still in that group. Jakob Fuglsang. And now back here to Porte, trying to mitigate the damage, but it's going to be tough here.
It's going to be very tough. Looks like over a minute difference right now to the Chris Froome group. And that left turn that it is took, that is more or less the last corner right before the last climb. So they'll be looking right at the climb right there.
Here's Valverde and Aru, still the two out front, but they're looking over their shoulders because they know the Froome group is coming. Valverde and Aru at the top of the screen turning left. The Froome group in the middle of the screen here as they roll through the village.
Maybe just a tad over 10 seconds difference right there. Michael Kwiatkowski doing the last turn that he could do, and it's going to be all up to Chris Froome.
So the Plateau de Solazan, over 11K and over a 9% average. The steepest part, again, is in the first 4K. It's over 11%. So we may see some attacks and some high-flying action coming pretty quickly here.
There's your MVP right there on the front, probably doing his last turn before getting out of the way and leaving it up to his team leader, the Chris Froome. 7 miles of suffering yet to come. This is going to be a long climb, very steep like we were talking about. You're saying that there's some kilometers of 11.5% average. So within that kilometer, there's many times pitches way above 11% at time. You know, there's also some flatter sections here and there. Brutal, a brute of a climb.
Well, given these time gaps, Christian, what we're seeing right now, for the first time, Chris Froome is just about the virtual race leader on the road. He is very close at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Within a second or two, he has to be more or less tied, at least, with Richie Porte.
And what also will work in his favor, the time bonuses at the finish, 10, 6, and 4 seconds. And Porte nowhere near the top 3 right now. So number 1, that's the Aru Valverde group. Number 2, that is the Fuglsang Froome contingent that also has Contador and some of the other favorites. And starting the last climb of the race. Alejandro Valverde leading the way ahead of Fabio Aru. What about the chances for these two, at least on the stage at this point? They've been out front for a while now.
That's a lot of energy that they already used up. I mean, I don't see their chances so good up here in the front. You think of those guys behind, especially Chris Froome, got to recover a little bit while he was on the wheel of Michael Kwiatkowski. But these guys have been on the stomp for a while now. We saw that Valverde attacking very hard in Montjuïc earlier in the week. Impressive what he did, but at the end he lost quite a bit of time when Chris Froome and Richie Porte went off the front.
See if we might see Aru and Fuglsang, the two teammates, working together for Astana. Nobody working with Richie Porte here, and he's coming up on the back of Michael Kwiatkowski now, who has dropped off from pacing Froome. And showing Richie 110 back. So on the lower slopes of the Solazan, these are some of the steepest pitches of this last climb that'll take us up to the summit finish and the end of the Criterium du Dauphiné. So Chris Froome leading this group. Just behind him, Romain Bardet, Jakob Fuglsang, Dan Martin, Alberto Contador. Emmanuel Bookman is there, best young rider in the white jersey. Louis Meintjes. Simon Yates, it looks like, is dropping out of the group at the moment. And still, they have Valverde and Aru in their sights, but haven't fully caught up just yet. In case you're wondering about the relationship between Aru and Fuglsang, two guys who both hope to be the team leader at the Tour de France for Astana in July. Team saying they're going to go as co-leaders. Will they coexist and get along? Well, they're actually roommates. So they share a room on the road. They both say they get along great and it won't be a problem. So we'll see if that kind of relationship will manifest itself on the road, and they might work together here on this last climb.
I tell you what Aru's doing right here today is a perfect teammate for Jakob Fuglsang. Jakob's just a handful of seconds, actually 25 seconds ahead of Aru, so this is perfect to have one of the guys behind you on GC attack, drive the pace while you could sit here on the wheels, try to recover as much as possible, and then go for the jugular yourself later on the climb when it really matters.
Back to Richie Porte in yellow, now 1:19 behind our leaders.
This is a time that Richie could pull a little bit of time back slowly but surely if he does have the legs. If he doesn't have the legs, I don't see this happening right now. As you see Chris Froome, as we talked about before this climb even started, that's the only option he has. Mikkel Kwiatkowski did such a great job for him in that valley, extending that lead over Richie Porte. Now he needs to finish the job.
And this is now the front group on the road. Chris Froome is the virtual yellow jersey, virtual overall leader of the race on the road, trailing Richie Porte in the official standings by 1:02, but as you can see, they are 1:12 ahead of Porte right now. And so now the interesting battle that's unfolding is potentially as Richie Porte now drops his other two riders here to try and salvage what he can. But the interesting story developing up the road in that front group, Froome and Fuglsang, they are separated by 13 seconds between second and third in the overall standings. And if Richie Porte can't reconnect or at least salvage enough time to remain in the yellow jersey, then it's a battle between Froome and Fuglsang for yellow. And it is very tight between them. Again, just 13 seconds. You have time bonuses at the finish. Very unpredictable the rest of the way. And it is Froome and Fuglsang, first and second in this group right now with just under 10K to go.
And Jakob's looking strong right there. He's the one on the wheel of Chris Froome. Let's not forget that yesterday he was the only one who could follow Richie Porte coming into Alpe d'Huez at the finish line. Chris Froome faltering just a tad, losing some time, about 23 seconds at the finish line today. Obviously feeling a lot better today. Now it looks like Richie Porte's starting to claw back a second here, a second there on these lower slopes.
Boy, put into perspective just how tough a position this is for Richie Porte. He's by himself. He knows the names of the riders up here. He knows what's at stake and the situation that has unfolded. Give me a sense of what's going through his mind.
Well, I mean, that's a good example of what you said about Jakob and Aru. You think about these guys, they're roommates, they're friends. Same thing goes with Chris Froome and Richie Porte. These guys have been good buddies, maybe best friends for years now since they've been teammates on Team Sky. So that is, he knows, these guys know each other so well. Chris Froome knows Richie just as well as, and vice versa. So it looks like that time, though, has come back within a minute now. So Richie Porte is coming back. Now he's back into that leadership role, the true leader on the road with that yellow jersey.
Froome and Porte, like Avon and Stringer Bell, friends until they weren't. And now they have to fight it out on the road. See who's going to get got here on this last stage. Gap under a minute, but still over 9K left to go on the Solazan, an HC climb above category ascent.
For those guys that Stringer Bell, then you got to think about Omar coming and winning everything. You know, you got to think of it. Jakob Fuglsang could actually steal the entire show with all the work that is being done by Chris Froome. And like you stated before, only 13 seconds behind. And let's not forget about those time bonuses out on the line.
Fuglsang has been extremely strong all week, and he won stage 6, a mountain stage, out sprinting Chris Froome and Richie Porte at the line. First ever World Tour win, so you know his confidence has to be sky high. And he is just riding on the back of Chris Froome, who's doing all the work in this front group right now. They've extended their lead back to over a minute on Porte. So this is right on the line between Froome remaining as the virtual race leader here. Starting the day 1:02 behind that man Richie Porte, and the gap right there at that 1 minute mark.
I think I saw Valverde being dropped out of this Chris Froome group. Yep, there's Valverde being dropped right now. paying the price for going on the attack earlier, but nonetheless, Valverde showing some serious form here in this Dauphine.
Now, a lot of guys in this group are not going to win this Dauphine, but they're going to take a lot of confidence and momentum to the Tour based on what we're seeing today.
Exactly, and Team Astana's taking the most confidence out of this. These are the guys that have gone from zero to hero real quick during this week.
Well, what a turnaround it has been for them. And now 2 legit leaders set up for the Tour 3 weeks from this weekend, starting in Düsseldorf, Germany. Contador also looking pretty robust. Dan Martin hanging there. Best young rider, Emmanuel Buchmann. While Valverde's been dropped, Fabio Aru is still here. Romain Bardet recovering these last few days in the mountains after a disappointing individual time trial. Louis Meintjes at the back there for UAE, guy who was top 10 at the Tour de France last year as well.
I would say most of the guys in this group have gotten better and better throughout this week. Richie Porte started very strong, maybe faltered a little bit on the biggest day that it really counts. And see that it's taking the team cars out of the way there. So that means that gap is underneath 1 minute. You need a 1 minute buffer to have those team cars in between you guys. So that bodes very well for Richie Porte. Started at the bottom of the climb, about 115 back. The virtual yellow jersey be on the back of Chris Froome on the left-hand side.
Well, Froome setting a pretty heavy tempo here, but these steepest slopes of the climb have not seen anyone really attack. Maybe they can't attack because of Froome's pace, but nobody taking real advantage of those pitches where it's been over 11%.
No, they can't attack. They're very happy still to be on his wheel at this point.
Simon Clark getting passed by Richie Porte, who is in desperation mode to try and salvage his Dauphine here on this last climb. The front of the bike race on the 8th and final stage of the 69th Criterium du Dauphiné. 4 climbs packed within only 115 kilometers today. This is the final of those 4 climbs and the only one of the day that's beyond classification. Here is Richie Porte, bringing back a little time, a few seconds here and there on that Froome group. And right now, at least according to the GPS, he is within the limit of still holding on to that yellow jersey. This could all very well come down to time bonuses at the line. 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3. If Froome were to win the stage and Porte doesn't get any time bonuses, Richie Porte would have to finish within 52 seconds of Froome's time.
Well, Richie brought back 20 seconds in the first 2 miles of this climb. That is the best opportunity to take time back just because it's so steep. So Richie Porte obviously pouring it on, maybe even staying within himself in the valley. Obviously showing everyone that he's one of the best time trialists, if not the best time trialist in this field. All by himself, doing what he does best.
Big mental test as well as physical for Richie Porte here on this last day of the Dauphiné ahead of the Tour de France, where he will be a team leader outright for the first time in his career.
But one thing's for sure, Chris Froome, Team Sky threw everything at him here today. They were not holding back. There's nothing else they could have done.
Boy, it's been so close, right on the margins of Froome maintaining the virtual race lead, Porte bringing it back. Fuglsang just hiding in the weeds here right behind Froome, trying to save some energy maybe for a late attack. Other riders in the top 10 of the general classification right behind, keeping the tempo. And that man isolated for a long time now from his teammates. He's been on his own for over the last hour. Richie Porte hoping to save his yellow jersey and the Criterium du Dauphiné. 7.5K left to go to the summit and the finish. What's the next play here from this group, Christian?
You're talking before the break about why hasn't anyone attacked. They can attack. I mean, Chris Froome is setting a furious tempo here. And if you think about it, he's going very fast. Think about how fast Richie Porte's going at the bottom, taking 20 seconds out of Chris Froome. So I think still that Chris Froome's saving a little bit in the tank. He knows exactly what he can and can't do. I think his cycling IQ is off the charts as far as what he can do. He knows his body so well, looking at his power meter. He's been in training so many times, pushing himself to the limit, both on the uphills and the downhills, as we saw on the descent of the Colombier. The same thing goes here there with Richie Porte, though. He knows exactly what he could do, and sometimes you In this kind of situation, though, you can't look at that power meter. You just got to go.
There goes Dan Martin. Dan Martin, the first move from this group, attacking, and no big response from the others. Martin, 8th on the general classification, 2:31 down. Now Fuglsang comes to the front. Martin 2.5 minutes behind the yellow jersey of Porte as the day started. Porte right now 47 seconds behind this group, and now Fuglsang stretching it out somewhat, and a gap opening up to Froome, Contador, and Bardet. Fuglsang 3rd on the general classification, but only 13 seconds behind Froome for 2nd place. And here was the attack that set it all up from Dan Martin.
Danny's never someone to really ever hold back. As you see Valverde, who's been dropped from the Chris Froome group. Richie Porte most likely catching and passing him right now.
Now Porte picking off Yates, who was in the Froome group for a while first. Valverde will be next, and then trying to set his sights on this group about 45 seconds back.
Alberto coming to grips right there. Bardet having to pass Alberto on the climb.
And now Fuglsang on the back of Dan Martin and stretching the lead on Chris Froome.
Yeah, this is what I was alluding to before. It isn't a 2-horse race. You have to think about Jakob. And Jakob's only 13 seconds right behind Chris Froome, and I got to say that Jakob has been outstanding throughout this Dauphine and getting better and better. Only guy to hang with Richie Porte when he was pouring it on at the top of Alpe d'Huez yesterday afternoon.
Well, you throw in the time bonuses, and right now Jakob Fuglsang is just moments away from riding into the virtual race lead.
You got it.
So we've seen Aru do it, Froome do it. Maybe Fuglsang will do it in a moment. As for now, it still resides on the shoulders of Richie Porte.
I think Richie's going to continue to pick off people as he climbs up this climb. He's got 4.5 miles to go, 7 kilometers, a ton of climbing. Obviously, still yet to come. He's only accomplished 4.5 kilometers of the 11K. So it's a matter of who he picks off. Is it the right guys?
Just south of 7K left to go. Froome ahead of Bardet, then Menkes, Fabio Aru. Fuglsang's teammate is back in this group. Bookman, the best young rider. No one else helping. Froome at the front. He did not respond to the acceleration of Martin or when Fuglsang came by him. And now it's Fuglsang at the front ahead of Martin. And
they're opening that up.
Tell you what, he's got to be smelling blood. He's got to be tasting yellow at this point.
For sure. Looks like he already opened up a 10-second gap there, maybe even a little bit more. The lower slopes, I was thinking that Jakob looked better than anyone else in this group, apart from Chris Froome. Chris Froome did a lot of work. Let's not forget that Chris Froome's been the one who's been attacking more than anyone else. Fabio Aru did a great job of more or less setting up Jakob Fuglsang for this attack. Don't forget about Aru being on the attack with Alejandro Valverde for most of the latter part of this stage.
Well, when you see the type of pace that Froome was setting, the fact that Martin and Fuglsang could both jump by him and open up this gap says so much about how robust the riding is of Martin and Fuglsang, how strong they are right now. Because typically at this point you'd see a long-range attack from somebody like a Bardet or a Contador, but they're still back here behind Froome.
I think Contador is struggling big time right now, but yes, I would 100% agree with you. If Alberto has the legs, he would already attack, and the same thing goes with Bardet. Bardet, those guys never hold back. Dan Martin, very impressive. He's another guy who continues to get better and better as this race progresses. A lot of these guys have been training really hard, but haven't really been doing too much of the high intensity, so they're using this race as kind of a litmus test in one way to see what they need to work on, and another way just really polishing their form as they come into the last couple of weeks of training before the Tour de France.
So Valverde is passed, and Porte rolling along, pushing the pedals over one at a time, trying to claw his way up this mountain and save just enough time to hold the yellow jersey. Standings as the day started. But we've already seen Aru be the virtual race leader. Froome has been virtual yellow. Fuglsang just seconds away from that position right now, all on the final day of the most important prep race for the Tour de France. What more can you ask for?
So looking at that graphic up on the top left-hand side, that is to these two gentlemen right here, Jakob Fuglsang and Dan Martin. So actually, he's brought back time on Chris Froome. Now I think he's in the 40-second, 48-second range to Chris Froome. So right now, it's still looking okay for Richie Porte, but it is so close to so many different people. And again, like you keep on saying, it's kind of maybe it could come down to time bonuses on the line.
Yeah, at this rate, it could all come down to the time bonuses. 10, 6, and 4 seconds for the first 3. Biggest danger right now, Jakob Fuglsang at the very front of the stage. And now Dan Martin not holding his wheel.
Dan Martin's a very explosive climber. If he could stay with anyone towards the top of a climb, usually he kills everyone in the sprint. As we saw, Jakob's not the fastest at the finish line, but man, is he strong right now. Looking fantastic. I have never seen Jakob look this good on the bike.
Won the silver medal at the Olympic Games in the road race in Rio last year. He's had top 10s in both Flèche and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. 7th at the Tour de France in 2013. A guy who can ride the one-day races as well as the Grand Tours and the week-long stage races like this. And now trying to put distance between himself and that man, Chris Froome, at the front of this next group on the road. The second group with Froome, half a minute now behind Fuglsang and Dan Martin.
Well, I think Jakob's going to be most likely by himself now. Still going to have at least 15 to 16, 17 minutes of climbing still yet to go. So even it's going to come up to the banner 5 kilometers. He's still got a lot of suffering yet to go. 1:15 back to Richie Porte. So he's almost in that virtual lead. If he is to win, have that time bonus. They're almost virtually tied right now on the road. The whole top 3, the blanket over that is only going to be 10 to 20 seconds, Steve.
Yeah, here's Richie Porte right now. How long has he been totally by himself? Earlier, it was a threesome, but he was doing all the work. Now, completely by himself. So you add it all up. He has been doing all the work for over an hour now on the road, trying to save this race lead.
I'm going to say even longer than that. You think that he was setting the pace on the Colombier at the bottom, and trying to absorb as many of those tacks as he possibly could, then setting the tempo yet again. That's when Chris Froome attacked him towards the top in the last kilometer of the Colombier. Then he bridged up to that group. Somehow Mikkel Kwiatkowski went through Richie Porte on the descent, did that big turn for the last 6 or 7 kilometers before this last climb.
If Fuglsang hands on and gets the win at this rate, 10-second time bonus, he would miss the yellow jersey by 2 seconds. That's how close it is right now. So Fuglsang at the front. That second spot is Dan Martin 5 seconds down. Chris Froome is the group 33 seconds back, and then Richie Porte by himself just over 1 minute down.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's looking okay as far as Chris Froome goes. He's only 30 seconds behind now, less than 30 seconds behind Chris Froome. That's very interesting. He started the bottom of this climb at about 1:15, so he's brought back 45 seconds on the Chris Froome group. This man right here, Jakob Fuglsang, he's most impressive by a long margin right here on this last climb. Like you said earlier, though, the guys you'd expect to attack many times, Romain Bardet, always a man with a lot of panache. We saw him attacking yesterday before Alpe d'Huez, putting in a little bit of time. Same thing goes to Alberto Contador, but if these guys aren't attacking, it's because they can. It looks like Alberto Contador has actually been dropped now, coming off the back.
He's talking into his radio, but he has been dropped by that group. There is Porte on the right, Fuglsang on the left. It's looking more and more like the battle for the yellow jersey is going to come down to these two you see on the screen right now. Just over 5K left. 1 minute the spread between Fuglsang and Porte. A head-to-head duel on the 8th and final day of the Dauphine, and now Bardet makes his move. Meintjes responding. Froome pulling off to the side. Bookman, the best young rider in the white jersey, is there as this group of 3 emerges. Froome just riding his steady tempo, not answering the initial acceleration.
That's a great perspective right there. You saw Richie Porte right there on the bottom of the screen. He has him in sight at least. But Jakob Fuglsang way ahead of all those riders.
So can Richie Porte save his yellow jersey? It'll have to be in dramatic fashion on this last climb of the Dauphine, and we'll take you to the summit finish next. It all comes down to the final 5K on the last climb at the Criterium du Dauphiné. Romain Bardet, Louis Meintjes, Emmanuel Bookman, and now Fabio Aru dropping Chris Froome here. They are the third group on the road. The leader is Jakob Fuglsang up here. Behind him, it's Dan Martin. Fuglsang at this point with a time bonus of 10 seconds for winning the stage would win the race if the gaps hold the way they are now.
By 6 seconds. Very close. It was very close before. Chris Froome is losing a lot of time now to Jakob Fuglsang. Chris Froome's about 33 last time we checked, maybe even more by this point in time. There is Richie Porte now coming up to the back of Alberto Contador.
We've seen Porte catch Simon Yates, Alejandro Valverde, and now Contador. Contador was in that Chris Froome group looking good for a while before getting dropped. And now it looks like Froome was about to catch back up to Bardet. And Contador just waves Porte right on through.
It's amazing how everything has changed so quickly. We were always concerned for Richie Porte with the Chris Froome group. Now it's completely changed. Now I think the only concern for Richie Porte right now is really Jakob Fuglsang.
And Porte has to be gaining in confidence. When you start to pick off riders of this caliber, that has to lift your spirits.
For sure. You have one rabbit after another. You set your sights on them, go after them. Don't get too excited when you see them, because it's easy to blow after you've been doing this kind of big effort ride at capacity. This guy has nobody in front of him. He's going for the win in the Dauphine. He's had his first big Pro Tour win this week. He might cap it off with the GC win.
Yeah, for all of the confidence Porte may be gaining, he's not gaining time on Fuglsang. He's picking off some of the others, but the Dane is still looking good.
I was quite confident that Richie Porte was going to come back into the top 5 on this last climb, but like I said before, is it the right guys that he's catching? Now, let's say if Bardet was off the front right now, it wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But considering that Jakob Fuglsang starts the day at only 1:15 behind in that 10-second bonus, right now he's your virtual leader. There you go right there. 19 seconds separates Richie Porte in the Froome group. Dan Martin as well. Let's not forget about him. 15 seconds behind Jakob.
Chris Froome, as he has been for most of this last climb and even before, leading the way in that group. Richie Porte not conceding anything here. And now maybe we could see just how far back visually that looks from the Froome group to Richie Porte, and that's not far.
Ooh. This is the first time that I've really seen Richie Porte seriously suffering. He looked like he was within himself this entire climb. He started this climb of 11.3 kilometers, and he was 1 minute and 15 seconds behind behind Chris Froome. So he's brought back that time. However, Jakob Fuglsang attacked a few kilometers ago with Dan Martin and extended his lead. So it looks like he's more or less 50 seconds ahead of the Chris Froome group.
Yeah, Fuglsang making time, not losing it to Porte the way the others are. Were it not for Fuglsang, Porte would be golden. Because Dan Martin, the only rider ahead of the Froome group, is 2.5 minutes down in the general classification, so he's not a threat to Porte at this point. It is just this man, who at this point is the virtual race leader on the road with just over 3K left. Froome taking a bath. It's a hot, sunny one out there, and he's been working hard. And now here's Meintjes on the move for the UAE squad. Bookman right on his wheel.
Yeah, Bookman's been flying. He looked really good yesterday. Col de Seren. Here we go. Now Richie's got, like I was saying before, it makes it a lot easier when you have these riders in front of you suffering. You get that confidence back. It makes it easier for you to push on. You see everyone else is suffering just like you. But then when he hears that time gap up to Jakob, I think his heart is going to break.
Louis Meintjes just outside the top 10 in the general classification, 354 down, looking for a top 10 finish, just the way he had last year when he was 9th at the Dauphine. Meintjes looking smooth.
Chris Froome looks like he's really dropped now out of that group.
Yeah, Porte's about to get Froome here. 3K left for our leader, Jakob Fuglsang. The 32-year-old Dane. It was a decade ago. He was the under-23 world champion in mountain biking. Now here he is in 2017, about to win the biggest race of his life if he holds the margin he has right now. So Meintjes, Bookman, and Bardet, this threesome, Third group on the road behind Fuglsang out front and Martin, who's sitting second. And this is Richie Porte coming up to the back of Chris Froome here. And Froome can see him now.
Remember when Jakob came over to the Pro Tour level from his Saxo Bank, a Danish team, so he felt at home with him with Bjarne Riis's team. But being fantastic right from the get-go in Paris-Nice. Had a lot of success very early on. He kind of struggled there for a while. It's great to see him back at the top, but actually, we never seen him ride this strongly before.
Right. How things can change on a final climb. A short while ago, Chris Froome was the virtual race leader. The yellow jersey, now the actual yellow jersey, catching him here with 2.5K left. The two good friends, former teammates, Porte helping Froome win multiple Tours de France. They don't even look at each other as Porte rides to the front.
I wouldn't look at him either. He just destroyed this race, and now a very good possibility that neither of them are going to win. And Jakob's going to laugh all the way to the bank. Very close, so as it is right now, it's only 5 seconds with the time bonuses separating Richie Porte and Jakob Fuglsang.
So Menkes here just ahead of Bardet. Bookman dropping off the pace at the back. Looks like he's going to win the best young rider competition. But this man looking for his second stage win of the week and the bigger prize, the yellow jersey of overall race winner. As we've been noting, following the narrative, it looks like it could come down to just time bonuses at the end. Menkes, the 25-year-old South African, was 6th at the Tour of the Basque Country earlier this spring. 8th at the Tour de France a year ago. And now Richie Porte just ahead of Froome here. Menkes and Bardet. 2K to go for our leader, Jakob Fuglsang. And he still right now is the virtual leader on the road. And the way it's been going may not even need the time bonus. It's right on the bubble.
It's true. Keeps on taking 1 second here, 1 second there. Richie Porte was really pouring on there. Now for a second there was 1:16. He would have won without the time bonuses.
Yeah, but at this rate, though, Christian, you got 2K left to go. Unless Dan Martin can find another gear and somehow catch and pass Fuglsang, he's going to win the race. So that means he'll get the 10-second time bonus.
Yep.
And with that, he easily wins. So it's up to Porte now by himself to try and somehow cut into the lead of Fuglsang that's been growing.
If you're in the BMC camp, you just have to hope that Richie Porte just saved that just a little bit. You saw what he did yesterday in those last few kilometers, putting in a bunch of time between him and Chris Froome with relative ease, especially when you consider it really wasn't that steep at the top of Alpe d'Huez.
Richie Porte won the individual time trial on stage number 4, took the yellow jersey on the first big mountain stage after the Mont de Chott, hoping to hold it all the way through this 8th and final stage, but it is Jakob Fuglsang on the left there who's in position to steal it on the last day. And now Porte with another acceleration trying to drop Froome.
This is all in right here. Less than 2 kilometers ago. Small climb still. He's been climbing for almost a half an hour at this point in time. Completely at capacity. And if anyone could take the time that he needs to take out, it's Richie Porte. We've seen him do this so many times, especially in smaller climbs early in the year. Down at the Tour of Down Under, the power that this man has in his little body is unbelievable, especially when you see what he does in the time trials.
This is everything you would hope for in a one-week race, the top prep race for the Tour de France. All of the top Grand Tour riders in the sport, facing some of the signature climbs in the Alps in southeastern France, some of the same ascents they'll see at the Tour de France next month. It all comes down to the last climb on the final day, and the man wearing the yellow jersey desperately trying to hold the lead, and it's right on the bubble as this man Jakob Fuglsang looks to take it away and win what would be the biggest race of his entire career. Just over 1K away now. There's Dan Martin at the bottom of the screen, sitting second on the road.
So Richie can only concede 1 minute and 4 seconds at the line. If Jakob is to get those time bonuses of 10 seconds, he'd still be in second place. And Richie would be okay, but as of right now, Richie is not going to win that race.
No, as it stands, the margin, the way we have it here, Jakob Fuglsang would take the victory.
Sometimes the GPS doesn't work so accurately, especially on a climb like this when you're going many switchbacks. It's really hard to tell exactly what is the actual time.
Now 1K to the summit for Jakob Fuglsang.
Yeah, so we have to take that with a grain of salt. Remember that a little bit, so that can change a little bit when we actually see the true and accurate time as he comes across the line.
Now with Porte motivated after passing Froome and throwing everything he can at the road to try and hang on to this yellow jersey, hard to see how it's not going to come down to the bonuses.
See the speed there of 10 miles per hour. Best climbers in the world, giving everything they have. That's how steep it is right there. A lot of times it's really hard to explain and really see how fast and how hard it actually is. Or bring it down to layman's term if you'd see just a regular decent cyclist trying to make their way up this climb.
So Dan Martin at the bottom of the screen, second on the road. Fuglsang at the top of the screen. He's the leader. This is Richie Porte, who at this rate would lose the lead on the final stage of the race. Jakob Fuglsang can almost see the finish line from here. Fuglsang, the 32-year-old veteran of the sport, trying to take the yellow jersey from that man, Richie Porte.
Right now he'd lose the race overall by 7 seconds. As it stands right now, 1:12 behind.
Now if Porte had a little more time, the way he's going, he could ride himself potentially into maybe the last time bonus, which is 4 seconds, but may just run out of road and may not matter the way Fuglsang's going at the front. Richie Porte seeing that lead slip away with Fuglsang into the final kilometer. Now inside of the final 500 meters. In fact, it's 300 meters at this corner. With Vincenzo Nibali leaving the Astana team before the start of the year, it gave Fuglsang one last chance to go back to the Tour de France and try to make a serious impression as the overall leader. Thinking about leaving the Astana team after 5 years, later in his career now. Taking one more shot at it this year and setting himself up beautifully with this week in the French Alps. A stage win on the 6th day of racing, his second stage win on the final day, and maybe now taking the biggest prize of all. Perhaps it'll be the yellow jersey of overall race winner as the clock starts back to Richie Porte. 10-second time bonus for the win for Jakob Fuglsang. Here's Dan Martin. He's going to take second. That'll be a 6-second time bonus. Fuglsang starting the day 1:15 behind Porte.
Menkes will take the last time bonus. So no more time bonuses on the line. Richie needs to be home and dry in 1 minute and 4 seconds behind Jakob Fuglsang if he wants to keep that yellow jersey.
And here's Emmanuel Buchmann. He'll be the best young rider of this race.
I don't think he's going to be able to do it here, Steve. Look, he had over 500 meters still yet to climb.
Fabio Aru next, and not looking good for Richie Porte. There's Romain Bardet as well. Time slipping away for Richie Porte here on this final stage at the Criterium du Dauphiné, and that's it. Here comes Porte, but the time is gone. With the bonus in play, Jakob Fuglsang wins the Criterium du Dauphiné on the final stage as Richie Porte concedes the yellow jersey. What a finish. And now Chris Froome, who for a while was the virtual leader on the road today, but got passed by some significant names on that last climb. And for the first time since 2012, will go to the Tour de France without a victory on the year. Boy, oh boy.
What a stage. 71 miles of racing, over 13,000 feet of climbing, all came down to a few seconds on the line.
Richie Porte almost pulled it out. Was in serious trouble to a lot of high-profile riders early in the stage. Had to do all the work by himself. Was without teammates and without support of any kind. That was the only man he really couldn't run down, as Jakob Fuglsang wins 2 stages and the overall at the 69th Dauphine. A man who came into the week without a World Tour win in his entire career. At 32 years old, now he has 2 World Tour stage wins and an overall title. Wow.
So showing that maybe he has a pregnant wife at home. Good things in the future for Jakob Fuglsang.
And his Astana team. He and Aru scheduled to go to the Tour as co-leaders, and both looking extremely strong throughout the week, and especially on this final day of racing. Final margins look like this on the stage. Fuglsang beats out Martin by 12 seconds. Louis Meintjes finished third at 27 seconds down. And Emmanuel Bookman, best young rider, the only other man within a minute on the day. Richie Porte 1:15 down. Chris Froome 1:36 behind. So it did come down to time bonuses at the end that gave Jakob Fuglsang his first overall stage race World Tour win, and took it away from Richie Porte on the final day of the Dauphine. Well, things look good for a while today for that man Alejandro Valverde. He was at the front of the race with Fabio Aru, was eventually dropped on the last climb. Comes across 3.5 minutes behind our stage winner Jakob Fuglsang. And now Alberto Contador, who was with the Chris Froome group for a while, over 4 minutes down. Contador building towards July. It'll be interesting to see how he feels about his form following this week in France. And not much question about how that man should feel about his form. Jakob Fuglsang, first-time winner of a stage race at the World Tour level, as he takes the Dauphine here on the last day, stage 8.
You won the stage and the GC of the Dauphine. How does it feel?
Oh, amazing. I don't know what to say. Of course, we tried to keep our GC, was the plan of the day, but it came down to a big fight, and with me and Fabio, we played it really good, and then of course also we had a few things that played in our favor, like that Froome, he had to pull after Fabio. The Valverde, he went so hard in the end that Daniel Martin attacked, and I just followed. I tried to keep cool the whole day, and without even pushing it too much, he dropped on the flat, and then it was all for the stage to start with, and yeah, and then we got it all.
What did you do on the line when you passed the line? It was because you're waiting for a baby.
Yeah, my wife is in Luxembourg and waiting for a baby, and we hope that she will come out just before the tour, even though she's expected to come in the beginning of the tour, but that was for her.
Jakob, let's speak about the tour. Am I right if I say that you are one of the main favorites of the Tour de France now?
Yeah, maybe it's still long to the tour. I'm really happy with my condition now. We will have to see if I'm too far already, but of course from now on I will have to take it easy until the tour, and then as it looks now, me and Fabio, we will be a good couple in the tour, and we will have a strong team for GC.
Quickly, who will be the leader, you or Fabio?
I think we will share it.
Thanks a lot and congratulations. Thanks.
Well, they'll be sharing it. but they are also both roommates. How often, Christian, in your experience, have you seen roommates at the Tour de France also be co-team leaders?
Never. Yeah, not that I know of. Not too many times you happen. That comes a lot of times with confidence in the front office, not willing to put it all on the line for one rider or the other, especially when these guys are really unknown quantities. You see what Jakob did this week. He's never done it before. He's never won a stage, never won an overall. And he did both of those things this week. Fabio's coming back from injury. You don't want to put the whole house on him as well, but he rode fantastic this week. I think that interview was great, though, what he said, especially how good they really played out today. Fabio going on the attack, Jakob being able to be calm and collected within the peloton, let everyone else do all the work, and attack at the end. Fantastic race.
Wins 2 stages and the overall this week, and he takes the yellow jersey of overall winner by virtue of the time bonus for winning the last stage. And Dan Martin also jumps up from 8th to 3rd to claim the final podium spot by just 1 second with his late attack on the final climb. Romain Bardet just outside the top 5 at a little more than 2 minutes back. Alejandro Valverde just over 4 minutes down. And some of the Americans, Andrew Talansky, Ian Boswell, Alexei Vermeulen, and Brent Bookwalter, all 24 minutes or more behind that man at the end, Jakob Fuglsang. Born in Geneva, Switzerland, has been a pro for over a decade. And now a baby on the way, perhaps wrapped in swaddling yellow clothing before the Tour de France begins. Who knows? But finally getting a chance to be a leader, with Vincenzo Nibali leaving the team before the start of this season. Also because their young Colombian, Miguel Angel Lopez, has also been out injured. So that's opened the door for the likes of Fuglsang and Fabio Aru to share the leadership at the Tour.
Yeah, you can't think about the mentality that goes on with all the training at home, preparing yourself. You have to question yourself, why am I even putting in all this work to try to win a race when, I'm going to have to work for somebody else? When there's a true opportunity you see in front of you, and he obviously did the work during May to come with this kind of form to the Dauphine. But he alluded in his interview as well, he maybe have to go back and take a step back when he gets back home, not train too hard before the Tour.
Don't want to peak too early, and 3 weeks between today and the start of the Tour. Arnaud Démare wins the overall points classification. He won one of the only sprint stages earlier in the week. So many breakaways survived to the line. Didn't see many full field sprints, but that man was decisive in his victory.
Yeah, when he won big, that's for sure. The one stage. Didn't see too much of the sprinters here this week. Fantastic racing here in this Dauphine. I've never seen anything like it, especially coming down in 10 seconds, and they would have been tied without those time bonuses.
And the young Dutch rider, Koen Bouwman, who won a stage from a breakaway, also wins the King of the Mountains competition. Was in several breakaways early in the week.
Very aggressive racing here this Dauphine. I can't say enough about it. Great to see some of these young riders coming up. We got to see most of these guys at the front of the Amgen Tour California in May, taking that confidence with them. And same thing goes with the confidence from the Astana team going into the Tour de France.
So it is Fuglsang, Richie Porte, and Dan Martin. The top 3 at the 69th Dauphiné. An exciting race in its own right, but how much does it say about what's going to happen in July overall at the Tour in your mind, Christian?
I hate to say it, but not that much. I mean, we saw a lot of good racing. We saw a lot of these riders getting better and better as the week went on. So it goes to what your feelings are during the race. So if you are getting better and better, that bodes very good. You go home, rest up a little bit, train a little bit more. You're going to be 10 times stronger than you were here at the start of this Dauphiné, right at the Tour de France, just in time. Let's not forget that the last 3rd week of the Tour de France is still 6 weeks away, Steve.
And we will see you there in Dusseldorf as the Tour kicks off in Germany in early July. In the meantime, for Christian Vandeveld, I'm Steve Schlanger. What an 8 days it has been at the Dauphiné. Jakob Fuglsang stealing the show in the yellow jersey on the final day, and now so long from the Criterium du Dauphiné.